Welcome, Jane.
Oh, Kimberly, thank you for having me on. It's great. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I'm excited to have you on the show and congrats on your book, Tilda is Visible, that is coming out in February. So
Mm.
excited to have this advanced copy. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm really excited and I love what they've done with the cover, but it's out on the 25th of the 2nd, 2025. And I only just realized that in the last week. And I'm so excited about those numbers, the numerology or something behind it. Yeah, it just feels really, I don't know, like it's meant to be. Yeah.
No, it looks great. Even that it says it like so the preview, but it says on
Mm,
sale 2525. And yeah, it does. It just flows nicely. You're like, of course I'm
yes.
gonna remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a really lovely energy to it.
So tell me, Tilda is Visible. So tell me about your experience bringing this to
Mm,
life and why the focus of visibility, which I think I know, but as it
mm.
aligns and relates to midlife.
Look, this book, it was, it, I had the idea about 10 years ago. So I had an experience in my mid 40s where I was misdiagnosed. I will say misdiagnosed at the beginning with a degenerative eye condition. But I didn't know that it was a misdiagnosis for nearly 3 months. So I was actually sent to, it's called the Centre for Eye Health in Australia, but it's funded by the Guide Dog Association. I was told that I had a condition called retinitis pigmentosa, which meant that I was going blind. And it was just under 3 months before I got in for further testing. And during that time, at first I freaked out, and then I went into this, I guess I fell down a rabbit hole where I started to ask really big questions about what it means to see. Like, how do I see the world? How do we see? How do we even see? Each single person on the planet sees a different version of reality. They see their own version of reality. And so I started to question, how did I see the world? How do I see myself? And if I lost my sight, how would I see myself? And one day I was looking in the mirror, and up to that point, it was probably an exercise in self-loathing. I was critical of my wrinkles and my freckles and the aging process. And on this particular day, I looked in the mirror and it was just like the world tilted. It was a really very strange shift in perception that I had. And I looked at my face and I suddenly felt nothing but love for every mark, for every line. And I thought, oh my God, am I not going to see myself age? Am I not going to see myself get old? And when I thought that, I realized that would be something I would grieve. It would be a loss. And if I felt that way, that it was going to be a loss, then why would I try and erase my age or deny my age? And so that was very much the seeds of where Tilda is Visible came from. It happened at a time in my life where I was in a very unhealthy relationship. I was juggling a lot of balls in the air, like so many women do. Those balls, everything collided with perimenopause, as it does in your mid 40s. And I had this experience at the same time. And out of it came this, I guess, understanding that perhaps I hadn't been seeing myself clearly, that I'd been invisible to myself. And the next 10 years was a journey in learning how to see myself again. And at the end of that, I sat down and I wrote Tilda.
Yeah, I love this story. And I love this idea of grieving the
Mm,
inability, potential inability to see
mm,
yourself age, right?
mm,
Because there is something that, our society has definitely does not support aging, right? The way we
Mm,
would like it to. And of course, so many people try to stay looking young.
mm,
And yet there is something about embracing and owning the
mm,
aging process that I think
mm,
is, I don't know, it's so powerful. I love seeing women who do that.
mm.
It's really powerful. And so I love that you mentioned that was a grief for you, a potential part of a grieving process of what if I don't see myself age?
We all want to live. We all want to get old. We want to stay alive, but I don't think that we actually include we want to see that that time, that march of time across our face. As I want to be old, can I be wrinkle free? And yet they're the markings of our life and the people that we've lost and the experiences that we've had, both good and bad, and they do mark us. And I think it was a real gift for me to experience that at that stage. I've maintained that desire to see that life on my face. Occasionally, I won't. Occasionally, I'll look in the mirror and go, "Oh God, is there anything I can do here?" But generally, I'm like, "No, this is it. This is part of it, and it's a gift to be here. It's a gift to get old, and that is going to leave its mark on me."
Absolutely. I remember when I feel like Botox was just coming out or we were hearing about it, and it must have been the year maybe 2001, if I'm remembering correctly, because I remember being at George Washington University and sitting with someone who was helping me get into a private class with someone to discuss goddesses, right? And I
Mm,
remember she was reading the paper and she was like, "Oh my gosh, this is horrible. It's like this thing, it's like poison people put in their face." And we were young then. We
mm,
were early
mm,
t we were late 20s, right? And it was like, "Why would someone do that?" And she was like, "I love everything that you see about Georgia O'Keeffe and her aging process." And that just
mm,
always stuck with me because I was like, A, I hadn't heard about Botox before,
mm,
and B, I was like, "Well, it's fascinating that this young woman," and here we are learning about goddesses in this women's
mm,
studies program, and that she loves the aging process of Georgia O'Keeffe. I was just like, that has stuck with me for many years. And
mm,
so I do think we as a society are encouraged not to age. And
mm,
yet there's something very powerful about it. And that's why I really just come back to you being like, what if I won't be able to see that process and how
mm.
sad that would be?
Mm. And I do think, and look, I'm supportive of women making their own choices, whatever they may be. And I would say the majority of my friends have had Botox or have had some sort of work. And I'm certainly not judging them for that. But I do think that one of the most rebellious things that a woman can do is actually like herself. And that means everything about themselves and to just be able to sit in the discomfort of, okay, my youth is back there, but I'm gaining something else as I move forward in my life and in my years. And that is generally a kind of wisdom. And you were just saying you were going into a goddess class. We're meant to be the crone, the wise woman as we get older. And that includes visually and physically as well. And that crone is not some grizzled old woman in the forest. It's actually a really powerful, sexy creature who has a lot of life experience to be able to share and spiritual power in that. So I look, it's a journey that we're on as women as we get older, but I do ask my girlfriends to at least just consider how they're going to age and how they can embrace that and how they can see themselves because that's what I'm writing about in Tilda. It's really about learning how to see yourself because she wakes up one day and is becoming invisible and she's diagnosed with invisibility. And there are many reasons why someone might be invisible today in today's society, but the way that I approach it in the novel is very much she's lost sight of herself. And I think so many women, as they do that, as they get older, they do that.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing about, like, friends and whatnot, and yeah, it's super common, I totally get that, and to each
Mm,
his own, no judgment, everyone has their own way of processing aging. I like
mm.
to do Zoom enhance your appearance on the highest mark. It's like, whatever, you don't see really what's here, but that's my form of Botox. But I think that it's important, this recognition too around invisibility, because this is something that so many people speak to when it comes to
Mm,
midlife. And so I'm curious just how your journey into midlife, like what has been, some things that have surprised you, that have delighted you. I think of the crone and the
mm,
wisdom that comes with that.
mm,
And that is a delight, I think, for many people. And
mm,
also they'll no longer caring to the degree what other people think. So tell us a
mm,
little bit about like your journey into it. And I've got my notes as I mentioned over here. And really my first big question is like your perspective on life. How has it changed? The
mm,
highlights and the challenges that go along with this time of life.
mm. It's been midlife has really been crawling through the flames for me, I would say. But I was in quite a difficult relationship, and it was in a blended family situation. And saying that, I have a very amicable relationship with this man now, but together it was just horrendous. And it coincided with perimenopause and that whole midlife. And we had 4 young boys together. I had 2 and he had 2. So, and we had full custody of his 2 children. So they call me mum. I was raising 4 young boys. I was, giving the whole time, rescuing, giving, doing way too much, too many balls in the air, perimenopause, all the rest of it, and just completely lost sight of myself. And I went on a journey after the relationship broke down. I was alone for 7 years before I even started dating again. I went on a journey where I decided I needed to not only heal the relationship, but look back at my life and heal why I kept drawing in the same types of relationships. So, generally, you bring into your life someone who is going to enable your own stuff. You can never actually blame the person for the problems. It's always, I am the master of my own destiny. If I'm drawing in certain types of relationships, why? And of course, all roads led back to my childhood. So my midlife was very much about finally facing and healing a traumatic childhood. And I turned to meditation for that. And it had been something that I had been dabbling in for decades, along with all other forms of self-help and self-development. But I committed very seriously to a meditation practice. And that was a game changer for me. I was on this journey of really observing my internal programs, adding neuroplasticity into the mix, so changing my internal programs and sitting with myself every single day. And in that creation of space in my life, great healing came about. And so my midlife has been at times really difficult, very painful, very raw, but at the same time, like a grand adventure because I've made the most incredible discoveries about myself and been able to really recreate my life in grand brush strokes, actually. And now I'm at a very exciting point in my life because I perceive things differently. I see things differently. I certainly see myself differently. So midlife for me has been challenging but glorious, actually.
And I'm curious for listeners who are like, how do I recreate my life? Or what could reinvention look like for me? I love the reminder about meditation and changing the neuroplasticity of our brain and carving new neural pathways. But I'm just curious, are there any other ways in getting to know oneself? Are there any
Mm,
other ways that you think that our listeners could dabble in the idea of recreating? And again, it doesn't mean because they don't like what they have right
mm,
now, but sometimes it's just what's the expanded version of me look like?
mm. So when I was going through this, I really wanted to. There are great teachers out there and really great books, nonfiction books on it. And I really wanted to immerse myself in some entertainment that kept me in the work, in the self-development work. And I really couldn't find a good women's fiction story that was telling the journey that I was on. So I wrote it. So that is exactly what it's autofiction. Tilda is Visible is autofiction. And Tilda definitely goes through this journey that I went through. And I've weaved in all sorts of things that people can incorporate into their own lives. Everything from vision boards to meditation to listening to their inner critic and reprogramming that. Yes, I've taken everything I could and thrown it into a novel form and tried to make it as entertaining as possible because I don't want to preach to people. And I don't particularly want to teach people either. I think there are so many incredible teachers out there. I just wanted to entertain within that personal development space.
Yeah, I like that. The idea of how do I take a nonfiction story and
Mm,
teachings, but weave it into fiction and weave it into like storytelling, which I guess you can also do through nonfiction, but not quite the same way as you can with
mm,
fiction. Because there's something so nice about fiction, how changing I to she can give so much more liberation than
yes,
the word I.
yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I was able to, through Tilda, move into some areas that weren't perhaps my personal experience, but then other areas that were my personal experience, but I didn't necessarily have to hurt anyone in my life. I could go, oh, it's fiction, it's fine. It's not you. Yeah.
Yeah, no, genius.
Yeah.
What would you say from a creativity or passion perspective that has changed for you or opened up for you in midlife? And clearly writing
Mm.
fiction.
Yes, I would say that what's happened for me in midlife, I haven't really made any new discoveries or picked up any new hobbies. But what I've done is I've really created space for the ones that I was always drawn to. So I guess I've always been a big reader. I've written my entire life. I've always been creative in certain spaces. And when I had younger children, perhaps I wasn't doing it as much, or certainly not writing. I've always written. I've always written for rent, I call it, but from it. But I haven't written what I wanted to. And Tilda was the first novel back where I've really written what I wanted to write and also what I wanted to read. So I think that in midlife, I've gone back to that. I've gone back to actually feeding my own creative spirit by writing what I want to write, reading what I want to read, and just doing the things that I think I have always done, even as a child, but really just loving them now and actually making them such a big part of my life.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that things you've always done because yeah, I do find that for a lot of people in midlife, it's almost like a return to those childhood passions, right? Those things that they
Yes.
used to love before they had to adults or conform to school, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I even I've returned to animal rescue work, which I always did as a teenager. And then I travelled for 13 years in my 20s and 30s and had young kids and everything. And I moved out of that area, but actually in midlife I've come back into working with rescue groups, and this time with particularly with very traumatized rescue dogs.
Yeah, so tell me about that because I don't know if but I have a nonprofit called Pigs and Pugs Project, and we donate
I
to.
went on the site. It's
Oh, you
great.
do?
Yeah,
Yeah, we donate to
yeah,
pig
yeah.
sanctuaries and pug rescues, and you know what is just crazy right now, at least in the US, is pug rescues are just inundated. It's
Mm,
almost a bit of a crisis. There's never been so many. And
mm,
we give micro grants to these organizations. And I'm just like, I see them come through on social media and it's just so heart-wrenching, and then I'll save it and I'll go back and do a micro grant, and it's so heartbreaking, and I just think, "My gosh, if I was on the ground like these rescues are,"
mm.
and, like, a lot of them on the West Coast and in Texas, interestingly enough, but anyway, it's I think it would just break my heart because it breaks my heart just seeing it there and only doing a micro grant, which is 50 to 1,000 usually.
Mm,
But it's just not enough, right? It's a drop in the bucket. So
mm.
how are you engaged in it and how do you protect your heart?
Yes, no, I can't do on the ground rescue. It's too difficult. And the people who do, and I know a lot of people who do, they're amazing. They really are amazing. But, and I'm sure it's the same over there. Here in Australia, you have people who are running rescues and working in rescue organisations, and also vets, because they're having to put down so many healthy animals. It's a mental health crisis for these people. I uh, so I was working in cat rescue for quite a few years, and then had my heart completely broken over one cat. So I thought, oh, someone said to me, "Look, I've got this dog. Can you help out with this dog?" And so I helped out with this dog that had been savagely beaten and cigarette burns put out on it and everything. But I was able to use the neuroplasticity techniques that I was using in my meditation, and also that I'd been using on my son through a dyslexia program that he was in. I was trialing them on this dog. And in the end, I was able to reprogram this dog to and because the dog was non-reactive, so really easy to work with, but having panic attacks. I was able to program him out of having these panic attacks over a period of time. Now, Joey is the same, who I said I've got at the moment, and I've had him now. I ended up adopting him. I've had him for 4 years, but it was the same thing. He had awful panic attacks. He doesn't have those anymore. He's got the generalized anxiety and probably always will, but I find it fascinating to take these animals and over a period of time wire this trauma or as much of it as possible out of their brains. And so I was so successful with Joey because they thought that he was the worst case of trauma that they'd ever seen, that now I consult for a number of rescue groups. So if someone is fostering or has adopted a dog that is really traumatized and they don't know what to do with the dog, I consult for them. So it's a really weird sort of space to have found myself in the rescue world, but it works.
It's so important. You have no idea how hard it is to get help for emotional help for dogs here in the States. The
Yes.
wait list is like 6 months, and do meds, we do, like, acupuncture, all the things, and we've had Mookie now 9 years, and we just finally were like, "Okay, this is just how he's wired, we just have to deal with it," but the
Yes.
anxiety, the barking when you go towards the door, you put your shoes on, and just the trauma he had before we got him, and it's so overwhelming, and when you work
Mm,
with all these trainers and all these different people and no one can help, I'm like, "Oh my
mm.
gosh, you're a godsend," because it's really hard to get that help here in the States, at least in the DC area, without some ridiculous waiting list, and then, it's
And
like.
we have that as well, but it sounds like you would be in a position where you could do what I'm doing and consult people, because when you've had animals for a period of time and you've gone through the vet behaviorists and the different trainers and the different meds and the different things to try and help a dog, when someone is starting that journey, someone like us is years down the track from with helping 1 or 2 dogs, we can then go and we can say, "This is what's happening with your dog, and if you do this or if you give this support." Yeah, so that's what I'm doing. I can't go in and rescue them from the beginning. It's too traumatic for me. I'm just too sensitive, but I try and help in this way.
That's huge, it's huge. I remember we've dealt with separation anxiety for him since we've had him, so we either need to have someone with him or have him in daycare.
Mm.
And I remember being at do you know Best Friends? I think they might have a branch in Australia, I'm not sure, but they're
No.
a great
Mm-mm.
rescue organization here in the
Mm.
States. And I remember being at a training there and asking them how they handle it, and she said she had a dog that the separation anxiety was so crazy that even jumped out the window when she left to go after her. And that's always stuck with me because 'cause I'm like, "Okay, maybe my dog isn't as bad. He doesn't jump out windows." But just the
Yes.
intensity and just the fear that these animals must feel to have their caregiver go away, like, even if you go to the bathroom. So it's, like,
Yeah, yes.
heartbreaking.
Yes, and I think and for anyone who's listening, and I bet there will be, because there's so many people out there who end up with anxious dogs, and it's not just rescue dogs, because a lot of these dogs come from breeders as well, where the mother is gestating this litter, and the frontal lobe of the pups, it's not wiring up properly. That's why they're so anxious, because the mother herself is in a heightened state of stress the whole time. So she ends up having these pups that are quite anxious. So you can be paying a lot of money and you'll end up with a very anxious dog. And then people are like, "Oh, I've paid all this money," and it ends up on meds or whatever. You know, if you are rescuing a dog, people think that it's, oh, life is normal and let's just treat it like a dog and give it love and it'll be okay. The dog I've got at the moment, he actually had no walks, no excitement, soft toys only, nothing that kind of could lift his energy at all, and he slept for 3 months because he'd been so badly traumatized that these dogs need to decompress. And that decompression process, then he can start to go for walks, then he can start to do things, but that decompression process with a rescue animal can take at least 12 months. You've got to be very patient with them.
And yet it's so worth it, isn't it, Jane? It's so
Look,
worth
I
it.
just honestly, this dog, I ended up adopting this one, and that all the rescue groups, the rescuers in this group, they said it's a no-kill shelter, but they did say to me that he might need to be put down. He was so traumatized, they'd never seen a dog like him, and they didn't know whether he could get through it, and he is the most awesome, big-hearted animal. I love him immensely. He is a bit anxious, he really is. He hates me going out, but he's beautiful. I'm madly in love with him, and I adopted him.
Yeah, it's such a sweet story, and it's so nice to hear, like, success of being able to actually help and help
Mm,
get the alleviate some of the symptoms of the trauma. And I'm
mm,
curious for you in midlife, how working with anxious, traumatized dogs has helped your own journey through this
mm.
process of midlife.
I think anyone who has animals and loves animals is helped by them because there is an unconditional love there. But it's what I said before, it's just going back to one of the key reasons I think I'm here in my life. I was always rescuing animals when I was a child. And then, for whatever reason, through my 20s and 30s, I didn't have animals. But now it's something that is really important to me. So I feel like it's more of a coming home for me and who I am, and a way that I express myself. I not only express myself through my writing and my creativity in that way, but I express myself through rescuing. And I made a choice a few years ago to stop rescuing men. So I now rescue animals. I don't rescue men anymore. It's worked out really well for me, actually.
I love that. I love that. So tell me too, like the evolution for you with relationships, right? So you've
Mm,
touched on it, of course, in your own experience getting out of that relationship. And I cannot believe you had 4 boys. I'm just like, oh
mm,
my gosh, the testosterone in that house. I just cannot imagine. I'm just curious, like, how has it evolved for you in particular in midlife and not even just with men, but girlfriends? Because
mm.
there's a lot of shifts I think that take place for women in midlife around relationships.
I I do relationships really well. I have 2 ex-husbands. The first one I had my sons with, and he's still family, and in fact, I'm currently organising his 60th birthday for next week with his girlfriend. So we all get on and it's all great. We're all family. So that's wonderful. And it's been really good for my sons to have their parents remain very aligned in our parenting process together and very respectful of each other. So that has been wonderful. And then I had my next marriage, which was really difficult for many reasons, not just because of him, but because of some of the baggage that he came with. But so that ended, and yet I actually was on FaceTime with him today, and we meditated together. We have a good relationship. It's fine, and he knows that I'm still parenting his sons as well, which is really great. They're great boys and they're 18 and 21 now, and my boys are 25 and 20. So I've got 4 men in my life. I'm through all the horror of the young boys thing, and I've got 4 gorgeous men in my life. So I do exes really well, actually, and I don't have those that relationship that some people have where they hate their ex. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. But my girlfriends are everything to me. And I have relationships that I've had for over 50 years. I have one group of girls from school who we all met when we were 6 or 7. So it's coming up to 50 years. Um, a lot of very long-term friendships. I love my girlfriends. Love my lady friends. Women are awesome.
I'm curious how you maintain them because I think a lot of listeners would relate to feeling like it's hard to keep in touch or
Mm,
we're different, we've grown apart. And
mm,
for you to have people in your life from 50 years is
mm.
amazing. And so, are there any
Yes.
tips that you would give?
There's one group, so my friends here in Sydney, and we're all kind of tottering distance to each other after a couple of wines, so that all works really well. And we've been friends probably since we were about 20, so long friendships as well. But then we go back to my school friends, and we're all very different people it's just an unusual thing, very different lives. We come together once a year for a trip. We're in touch in between, but we come together once a year. We might go to Bali or we might go somewhere in Australia to a winery. We just had a trip to one of the women, she lives on a farm, and we just went to the farm for 3 days actually. So we meet up once a year and just have a blast. I think there's no pressure with the relationship. They're not everyday relationships. We're very different people and we just accept the differences, I think, and just enjoy the fact that we know each other so intimately because we've known each other since we were children.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you grew up in Sydney?
No, I grew up in a place called Ballina, it's about 9 hours
Oh,
drive north of
okay.
Sydney. I was born in Sydney, but we moved to Ballina. It's a little beach town. If you look at a map of Australia, it's about 2 hours south of Brisbane.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Mhm.
great, alright, that's amazing. Because I was like, "Oh, they must all live in the same area, and that's how they're able to stay in touch," but no, you're spread out, but you're still connected. I
Yes.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah, and very, one is still in the hometown, one lives on a farm in the outback. I'm here in Sydney, so we're all over the place. It's easy to stay in touch with people now, but I also think I know what you're saying. I think if any of these women were energy vampires, it would be very different. And I have ended long-term friendships because the relationship wasn't growing or it wasn't healthy. I didn't feel aligned to it anymore. And that's always a difficult thing to do with any relationship and certainly with friends. But no, with these women, it's just a gift.
But yeah, it is important to know when it feels
Mm,
energy vampire-ish. Yeah.
yeah.
It's just noticing after the interaction, whether or not it's phone, text, in person, whatever, it's like, how do you feel? Do you feel uplifted and energized, or do you feel like,
Yes.
"Oh my gosh, I've got nothing left.
Yes.
This was really intense." And that's interesting, but it's important to pay attention to.
Absolutely. And I think, and I've always advised female friends when they're in that situation to actually to cut the ties. It's in any relationship like that. When you give it some time, give it a little bit of work, but when you're chasing your tail around in circles with someone, often for years, and it's the same dynamic over and over, no, you cut it. You set them free.
And yourself, yeah.
Mm, yeah.
Do you have any particular physical or emotional kind of wellness practices that have been helpful
Mm,
for your journey in midlife in particular? I don't know. Do you have a regular Pilates practice that you swear by or anything along those
mm.
lines that you're like, this helps my mental health in midlife?
Meditation.
Yeah.
Honestly, I meditated today. I do it every day. It really is my non-negotiable. I just I love it. It has changed my life. I do Pilates, I do yoga. In fact, I do yoga in the park once a week with a group of women. We've been doing it on and off for years with the most amazing yoga teacher, and it's Japanese yoga, and I really like it. But it's actually being in the park under the trees. I don't know whether you've heard of Bondi Beach. It's a very famous beach in Australia. I live there, so we do it up on this hill. We're looking over at the ocean. It's absolutely beautiful. And just being there on the earth outside is amazing to do yoga once a week. So that's very good for my mental health as well. I think having a dog is awesome. It gets you up and out of the house even when you don't feel like it. And I go for a long walk every morning with my dog. And look, midlife for me, I think a lot of my friends are finding like they're going through or they've come out the other side of menopause and have had some difficulties with it. And I haven't. And I always joke it's because I'm not married anymore. But I actually think it's meditation. It has been really easy because before meditation, I certainly had some hormonal issues. But the last sort of 7 years have just been very easy with all of the women's stuff.
Yeah, no, it's huge. I think it's so important to find that one practice that you're like,
Mm,
and not that it's the panacea, but it helps. It helps keep you grounded, rooted,
yeah.
supported, nurtured, all good things.
What do you do?
My big thing is ballet. It was yoga for 20
Yes.
years because I had a couple
Yeah.
studios and I taught for many years. And then I picked back up my childhood passion of ballet back in about 2018 regularly. But then I've had some hip surgeries, so when I have those, I have to take a few months off, so I'm currently
Mhm.
in that cycle of months off. And although
Mm,
I have to say it's nice because I have all this time back, because I typically do ballet once a day, so I have all this time back, but really miss it, and my
mm,
body's really aching for it. I'll be delighted when I get back to it. But yeah, some gentle stretching and ballet is really my big thing. And of course, yeah, my time with Mookie, the little guy behind
yeah,
us.
yeah.
And then my client, I really enjoy working
Mm,
with my clients. That keeps me active and engaged and mentally. Yeah. I would say those are tea. Like I always teach the everyday simple kind of luxuries and pleasures that
mm,
really I think help me who is quite Vata energy, stay a little more grounded, a little more rooted. And of course, what I eat, things along those lines, many
Mm,
fruits and veggies as possible. And
mhm.
yeah,
Yes, I agree. And I think things that when I was younger, I started to incorporate that I was trying hard to create good habits. Well, now at my age, all of those habits are there. And it's not just the meditation, but it's the way I wake up in the morning and the gratitude exercises that I just do quite naturally, and the lemon juice in the morning and the walking the dog and all of these just habitual things in the way that my day rolls out have been habits that I started years ago and now are quite normal for me, but I love them. I love them. They ground me in, I don't know, a healthy life.
absolutely. So important. For our last my last question for you is, are there any final thoughts of or pearls of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners in closing on your journey with midlife, or ways to inspire them to not feel invisible,
Mm.
to embrace the beauty of midlife?
Mm. It's interesting that you asked for pearls of wisdom, because in the book there is a character called Pearl, and it is Tilda's internal critic. I've given a name to what is basically program everything, always repeat loop. It's an acronym and it's Pearl. And this is the internal voice that so many of us battle. And my advice to women is become an observer of the way that you speak to yourself. It's so important. It's so important. If you want a better, happier, more content life, you start inside your head and you observe the way that you speak to yourself. And then you really just take the time to ask yourself the question, would I speak to my best friend like that? Was that kind? When you criticize yourself, you're looking at yourself and you say something, would I speak to someone else like that? Was it kind? Is it true? Is it true? And then just change it. Change the way you speak to yourself. One thought, one day at a time. And it's those small changes that you make with your internal programs and the way that you are speaking to yourself, one after the other, that over time becomes a very new program. It's like installing a program, and it can change your life.
Huge, huge. Mindful self-compassion, I
Yes.
think so
Yeah.
important. Thank you so much, Jane, for being with us today. And again, congrats on this amazing new book, which listeners will be able to find in February. But Tilda is visible. Congrats on completing this project. So proud of you.
Thank you, Kimberly. It was such a great conversation. Thank you.